How are you?
Good, good. Thanks. Great to be on another webinar with you guys. Like it's so great to have such a great distributor down in South Africa, stocking a lot of our gear.
Yeah,
So
fantastic.
yeah. So you wanted to talk about the BrewZilla Gen 4 because it sounds like that's just about to hit the ground, or you've just got the stock, is that right?
Yes. So the stock landed
Yep,
on Friday, and okay, it's to my surprise. I mean, the
yep,
65s are just shot out of here. Actually, I haven't even had a chance
yeah.
to brew in one of them yet, so I'm it's kind of gearing some space for myself to have a little feel on this machine and see what it's
Oh
like.
yeah.
So,
Got to make
um,
sure you keep one back for yourself then in that case. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
someone's not going to get a 65 because it's mine. Yeah.
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 It's
So
been a similar response in Australia. Like we sold out a few times already, and yeah, definitely it's proving to be a brewery type in high demand. We're still stocking the old one in Australia, so we still have the old Gen 3,
okay.
but yeah, we're noticing the sales are going down, substantially. Everyone's just jumping on the Gen 4 because they want those extra features, I guess.
So that's quite interesting. Are you planning at any point to phase out the 3.11?
I mean, as long as people still buy it, and it is slightly cheaper. I mean, ultimately, there are things on the Gen 4 which is just simply more expensive to make. So we've put a more expensive controller on there, so it's slightly more expensive and more expensive element because it's larger and has lower watt density. So, that's one thing we've done. I've got a number of other things that we've changed the configuration to make it more, I guess, flexible down the track, which has made it slightly more expensive. So because of that price gap, we thought we'd still sell both for a while, just in case there were some particularly thrifty customers who, just wanted to buy a cheaper one. But the reality is, I think the more people know about the Gen 4, the more they're, happy and see the value in paying a little bit extra for something which is simply, better built with better components.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the first things you notice with that. I mean, actually, when you put the two machines next to each other, you don't immediately, obviously, borrowing the controls part of the circuit. Um, but it's only when you start digging in there that you see that's just completely different. I mean, it's not even vaguely the same,
Yeah.
same machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing that a lot of people have asked, oh, what's going on with the Gen 5? Is there anything going to come out? But it's now getting to a point where it's so hard. The Gen 4 took a lot of development work on our front. We did a lot of optimization, tweaking things, and it's now getting so hard to find other areas we can improve. So I'm not even sure if Gen 5 will ever exist, to be honest with you. The Gen 4 is now, it's kind of like got us to a point where we can't think of any other things to improve. But moving forward from here, I think a lot of it's going to be the accessories that can come with the Gen 4. So, things like, new lids or the extensions, or we're working on distillation attachments, or the fact that now it's got a Bluetooth bridge. We can have Bluetooth accessories which then can communicate with the Gen 4 and work together to give you a more automated experience, give you better reproducibility of that beer or spirit recipe that you want to make, and then really make it easier to use, generally speaking. So that's sort of the sort of the direction it's going. It's not going to be, more and more generations of brewery, in quick succession. It'll be more of the accessories that come with that brewery.
Okay, and then okay, so that's interesting. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the distillation side because that's something obviously I'm quite interested in. I mean, you look behind,
Yep.
I've got a 3.11 with a sort of still head on. And one thing that's never really spoken too much about on these machines is the versatility because it's not just a brew machine for beer, especially
Yep.
now the Gen 4 with that new control system. Um,
Yep.
this is going to afford people who previously couldn't really do accurate distilling a much better
Yep.
opportunity. So did you have that
Yep.
in mind when you designed that controller?
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of a hobby which it's kind of weird. Distilling is technically, illegal without a license in Australia, but it's a lot of people seem to do it, in the backyard, and nobody really knows any better, I guess. But it's one of those things that I guess there's been a lot of our customer base interested in it, and craft distilleries in general are sort of growing in numbers, the number of people getting into their, craft whiskey and stuff like that. And a lot of home brewers are sort of, switching over and doing a little bit of that as well, and trying to master another hobby, I guess, with the same equipment. And we're noticing that the current stills we've got, like we have been selling these smaller Alco engine ones, the copper ones, which are sort of just about yay big, I guess, and
Yep.
they go on top of the BrewZillas. And look, they've been great, and we've sold them in huge numbers. But the reality is, I think we're starting to see a very more a very much more technical distiller, which is coming in and doing it at home as well. So people are wanting to play around with bubble capper plates. And like historically, I look back going 10 years. I remember when I first started, playing around with a lot of distilling and stuff like that. It was one of those things that most people would just make neutral spirit and just want to flavor that using essences. And look, there's still a market for that type of customer.
Yep.
And I think we want to make sure we still service that type of customer, but there's a much more technical distiller coming through which really want to make whiskey from scratch or gin from scratch and actually buy the botanicals. And I guess similar to the all grain trend of people making beer from scratch, the same thing's happening with whiskey and gin and other spirits. So that's kind of exciting to see, but we've got more work to do to make more options on that front. So it's certainly something that we're looking for customers' input at the moment. If people have certain features that they want to see in a still, like right now, we're playing around with a lot of new different designs of distillation apparatus.
Okay.
And we also tried to make the brewery more suitable for that application as well. So you'll notice that, the brewery controller have things like PID functions and stuff like that, which I think will be quite useful for distillation down the track.
I actually was reading an article from a process engineer that was trying to describe PID to a bunch of students or novices, if you want to call it that just really didn't have an absolute idea of what a PID was and how actually good those controllers are in process control. So this guy basically described it as a long gate, and there's one guy who basically needs to close this gate. So obviously he gives this gate a big shove, which is the P part, the push part, if you want to call it that. And obviously now this gate sort of gets to the end, but it doesn't quite sort of get there. Now you can't run back and forth to sort of close this gate. So they employ somebody else, and this guy just sort of gives it the last little bit of a shove. So it sort of gets to where it is, and maybe a little bit over or maybe a little bit under. And that's sort of the integral part, if you want to call it that. And then the last guy, basically, he sort of predicts, if you want to call it that the second guy maybe shoves it a little too far. So he sort of holds it back a little bit so that it lands in the correct position. So would you agree with that? Is that a good way to describe PID?
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. I mean, essentially, what you want, I think with distillation in particular, even more so, I think, than beer brewing, distillation is something which it really requires, some a very stable sort of input of power. So you're not sort of like, because if you're distilling and you've got a bubble capper, for instance, if you suddenly drop the power, you'll collapse the column. Like you'll notice the plates will be fully flooded, and then if you drop the power for some reason, all that spirit will just drop out and fall back into the boiler, and you kind of got to recreate that whole system. And if you overpower it, then they can flood too much and overflow. So you really want stability more than anything. And in beer brewing, it doesn't really matter. If we were to cycle elements on a bit through a mash, it actually doesn't matter that much. It's nice to have. It's sort of a great accessory, I think, for people who like that extra stability. But for distillation, I think it's really essential. And I think that's where it really comes into its own, because with distillation, depending on the type of distillation head that you've got, really sometimes you're wanting to control, the boiler temperature a lot more stably, and sometimes you're wanting to focus more on the temperature inside the head of the still. But I think having a PID function on there really gives you a lot more control over the whole process in different ways you can use it.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, if you've got a still, I mean, that's one of the issues with metal, be it copper or stainless or this sort of thing, is when you've got temperature variations across. Now let's assume your still head isn't insulated, and now suddenly you have some sort of, so obviously having materials with more insulation is better on the materials. So I mean, what have you guys, are you guys planning new stuff? I mean, we know about the distillation lid. Maybe we can talk about that first.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the distillation lid came out not that long ago. Firstly, we knew we had to make a lid which was more rigid. So the cone shape we used to have a dome-shaped lid, and the cone shape was able to take more weight, because we're noticing on a lot of the new stills that people are wanting to use. They're a lot bigger. They're usually larger in diameter and a lot bigger. And when you start packing them with things like SPP, the weight can get quite substantial because it's heavier than water density to when you're comparing the volume to weight ratio. So once you fill an entire column, which can be, let's say, a meter high, and let's say 50 to 60, 70 mil diameter, that's a huge amount of weight you're putting on the lid. So we had to already make sure we had a lid suitable for larger still design. So that's the reason why we've got these. On the 65, we're using a larger triclover opening. So we've got them as a 3-inch opening on the distillation that comes with it. And we've also started to use some interesting plastics as well. I know some people, I think, are a little bit scared of plastic with when it comes to distillation, because I think there's a sort of a fear that some plastics will leach plasticizers into the spirit, and alcohol has this amazing propensity to draw out things like that out of plastic. So certainly things like polycarbonate, vinyls, I would never want to touch in a still, or there's plenty of plastics out there which are terrible. But there's also some amazing engineering plastics, which I think are really awesome. And we started to make these sight glasses on the distillation lid specifically out of a really high-end plastic called PPSU. So we're considering possibly even using that in some of the new still designs we're looking at. But it's something which I think you'll start to see more being used in some of the equipment that we sell, because it's a plastic which takes a huge amount of temperature, huge chemical resistance. You can chuck acid in it, pure alcohol, all sorts of different solvents, and it basically is so stable, and it can go up to like 220 degrees or higher. It just seems like a plastic which can replace glass in a lot of instances for sight glasses on lids and stuff like that. So you don't have to worry about dropping it on the floor and smashing it. It's certainly not a cheap plastic. It's more expensive than stainless steel and even copper if you're comparing it weight to weight. So I think some people think of plastic as being cheap, but if you want to get really high-end engineering plastics, are actually kind of quite expensive. But that's something pretty exciting down the track. We're also playing around with some other different types of valves, which I think will be really handy in distillation as well. So
okay, that's interesting.
I think that's something kind of exciting. So with the BrewZilla, because we've got this awesome controller on the front here, and the processing power is not really operating anywhere near its maximum capacity, just brewing and distilling on its own. So it has the ability to then use that to do other stuff, things like controlling valves and other inputs. So something that we've been playing around a lot is with these little pinch valves. These pinch valves are basically a type of valve where they're controlled with a motor on the back. And unlike a motorized ball valve, these ones are kind of nice in the sense they just squash the outside diameter of the hosing down. So you've got like silicon hose like this, for instance, and then you would just push this through the valve like that. And then, you can just squeeze the valve down to open and close the flow of vapor, or you can have the flow of coolant or the flow of spirit coming out. So essentially, you can use these types of valves to automate the process for coolant management, flow management, or vapor management stills. So that's something which is really exciting, especially I find with distillation, it's one of those hobbies which takes such a long time. Like a distillation run can take easy over 5-6 hours, or even 24 hours if you're trying to make a pure neutral spirit or something like that. So I think with those types of lengths of time, you really need the assistance of automation, in my opinion, to look after and manage that process for you. There's nothing worse than getting all this great spirit and then you get your tails fall into the jar, and you're like, oh god damn, it's so annoying. So I think automation in particular is something which would really help a lot of home distillers get into the hobby and get good results.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. So, I mean, it brings me back to that initial point where I was saying this machine's so versatile now, because it's not just for brewing, and with all those upgrades coming, I mean, it makes sense. You're going to have an absolutely fantastic machine for beer brewing, distilling, whichever one you choose to do. And then obviously you're saving that cost, because you're not going to go and buy separate still, something separate for brewing.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's quite interesting. And then getting back to the plastic side of things, I mean, I did a little research on that plate, and that's very unusual. I mean, that's actually pretty exceptional material. That, so I'm quite looking forward to that and seeing all the benefits of that. Because I think there's a lot of benefits in that anyway. And like you say, this is not just any material. It's quite a
Yeah.
specialized material. I was surprised with the cost of it that you guys are even looking at that. But it's interesting the way you guys are going.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like it's just such an amazing feature set of the plastic. Like I think when you being able to see through something is like having something which is easily able to handle the temperature, just like stainless steel. Handles all the chemicals just like stainless steel in that sense. But being able to see through it, I think being able to see what's going on really helps a lot of home customers, especially when they're troubleshooting. In distillation, for instance, it's one of those things where you honestly you're distilling blind a lot of the time, unless you've got a lot of sight glasses or something like that which you're using. I mean, there are sight glass stills which exist, but even they have their own constraints. Like if you want to have a sight glass still, it's hard to get a thermometer through the chambers or put ports, because as soon as you start drilling that glass, it becomes very weak and can weaken the structure of the glass sight glasses as well. So I think like there is definitely a place for plastic in distillation. It's just got to be really well chosen resin, which is used in those plastics. And I think it's one of those things that we're eager to sort of do more research in this area and bring out some stuff which hopefully will take advantage of those features.
Well, maybe we should throw it out to the client base out there and say, well, okay, what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you think about this type of material used in distilling applications? I mean, it's maybe just a thought,
Yep.
and get some idea what guys think about it, and
Yeah,
maybe they can
definitely.
just
Yeah.
drop us mails and let us
Yeah.
know what their
Yeah,
thoughts are.
sure. Like, yeah, if you want to do that, I'd love to see that, because our whole company, it's all about listening to our customer base and then bringing out gear which they want to see manufactured. So, if we could put that question out to your customer base right now and say, what do you guys want to see in distillation, and what do you want us to make? And we will act on that seriously. If you guys, if there are particular types of automation, maybe it's like, something to a valve to, remove the heads automatically for you, or remove the tails, or something to basically, turn off the still when it gets to a certain temperature, or reduce power or something like that. We would love to hear from you. If you've got like, any ideas out there, yeah, definitely send them through and we'll make it.
Well, everybody who's watching, there's
Yeah.
some thought processes for you. I mean, not only that, and there's
Yeah.
also weight saving, which I think is a big thing. I mean, there's always an issue when you've got
Yeah.
massive still. Okay, it's fine if you've got a traditional big still, and it's, but with these sorts of things where you've got limited amount, you can't just pile any amount of weight onto some of these items. So that brings us to another thing where you could possibly look at the benefits that way. So yeah,
Yep.
interesting thoughts there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think there's definitely significant weight saving, and also, if you started to look at plastics in a still, I suppose, if you're going to put it that way, there's other additional benefits, I suppose, in the sense that it's a much better insulator as well. So, in distillation, as I was saying before with PID, like trying to keep it a really stable process is really important. And I've been using stills outside for a long time now, where if you've got a really cold day and all of a sudden the wind picks up and starts cooling the outside jacket, it's just all the metallic substances like stainless steel and copper, they just conduct so much heat as soon as the wind blows over them. And it is the opposite of having a stable process if you got wind blowing through, and sometimes it's just unavoidable. A lot of people can't run these types of things in the house, or don't want the risk of having a closed room or part of the house where ethanol vapor can potentially fill up into
Oh,
the
yes,
room, and
yeah.
they just feel safer, using it outside. So I think like, being able to have a material which still's made out of, which would insulate better, certainly I think would have other huge benefits if we went down that path.
Maybe that can be for another video at some point when you've got some of this
Yeah.
together. I mean, I know we've chatted about some of those other things, so possibly at some later point when you
Yep.
guys are a little further in the process, we can do another
Yep.
video and talk about some of these exciting products coming. But Key, I just want to
Yeah,
say
sure.
thanks very much for
Yeah.
your time. I know you guys are hell of a busy
Yeah.
then. Appreciate your time to
Yep.
chat to us, and
Yeah.
I'll look forward to that. And thanks for releasing that Gen 4 and getting us onto that new path. I mean, I think everybody out there is loving it. So thank you very
Yeah,
much.
definitely.
And we look forward to the new stuff coming.
Oh yeah, and thanks for your support. Really appreciate it. And you know, like hope the launch goes really well. And make sure to try to get more stock. I mean, we manufacture as fast as we can, but the reality is we just can't get it out of the factory fast enough. So yeah, get those orders in, and we'll do our best to get the stock to you as quickly as possible.
Awesome, Keith.
Yeah.
Thank you. And no, I appreciate it. And
Yep.
enjoy. I know it's night time there, so go and enjoy it. Well, it's getting close.
Yeah.
So go and enjoy your beer,
Yep.
and we'll chat again at another point.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Thanks again. Really appreciate it. Yeah,
Okay,
I'll have to
Keith.
get over to South Africa one of these days and do one of these in person.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to seeing you there. Or
Yep,
hosting
definitely.
you this side. That'll be good.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, no worries. All right, cheers.
All right,
Thanks
Keith.
for that.
Thanks very
Okay.
much. Have a good
No
one.
worries. All the best. Yeah, cheers. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.